आज की ताज़ा खबर। बेंगलुरु में रहने वाले लू और अमेरिका में रहने वाले सिड आपसे कुछ बात करना चाहते हैं। संगीतकार राजस के साथ आपका स्वागत है लूसिड में।
What's going on, people? I'm Lou.
And I'm Sid. And we are Lucid. It's like, Lou? I think.
What the?
I think the.
Simply unnecessary hype you're giving for no reason.
Bro, it's required, bro. It's required. I think the last few episodes, we've spoken a lot about change, as like you going to MBA and me getting into an internship and stuff. And we realized that change is like a very hard thing to embrace, especially when you're doing like a career transition. And we all know a friend who's like an engineer for 4 years, then worked for 2 years, and then suddenly she decided, okay, cool, I'm going to alter my career differently and go into sales. And now she's like one of the sales leads at a startup called Paperflite, and like she deals with like $1 million deals like regularly. So we need to talk to her. So that's what this podcast is about. So yeah, hi Varshni, how are you?
Hello, hey Sid. I'm doing good. Thanks a lot for asking. How are you guys? How is India, Sid?
India is amazing. I fit right back in. I thought I'll have like so much to adjust. I'm like, people would have changed. The city would have changed.
In the 8 months that you were
Yeah.
gone, right? I appreciate the confidence that you had in us, Sid. Seriously.
But I'm really happy nothing changed, and like now it feels normal. It's like, okay, cool. Like every day I keep going out and like I keep meeting these friends and stuff. So it's damn peace.
That's amazing. How is the MBA treating you, Lou?
Oh my god, what is this?
Yeah, we are getting interviewed here.
But yeah, thanks for asking, Varshni. It's been good. It's been hectic, but I really like it. Just one thing, guys, to all of our listeners, we know Varshni through a trek that we did together, and it was probably one of the best treks I've had because of Varshni. Okay, she was a lot of fun. And it was great fun. We did this trek called Sandakphu. We actually spoke about the trek in one of our podcasts long back. So that was the first time we met her, and after that, she's just like on the road to success.
And we've been learning so much from her. Like we've just been like friends with her like for 1 year, and we've learned so much from her. So yeah.
Awesome.
Oh,
awesome.
guys, that's a lot to say, man. Thank you. But I think it's the exact same for both of you as well, right? And the 1 year that we have known each other, everybody's just come so far, and I'm just so happy for all of us, just nailing it. This generation taking it by the storm. So yes, let's do this.
Okay, enough of praising each other. Now let's get started. So Sid, go for it.
Yes.
Man.
So Varshni, I think we have to start off with the main question. Is like, tell us about your journey. Is like, you've done so much, like, and like so much has changed over 2 years. Like, say if like 2 years ago someone's met you and like someone's met you right now, they'll be like, is this actually Varshni? Like, so much has changed. So tell us about like what has happened in your career, and like how did you go through it?
Absolutely. So like you guys introduced me, I'm an engineer by education. Cisco was too tempting an offer to, think otherwise. So that was the first company that I sat for placements. We got in. It was an amazing 2 years of, a conglomerate journey. But at the end of the day, the contribution that you were making, was slightly less significant than any other place, was what I was feeling. And as a starting off budding engineer, always so much more to learn. And for me, I think it's a very personal opinion, so to speak, but I wanted to be a part of any growing place that had an impact with any contribution that I was trying to make to the space. So that's what led to this entire decision per se. But I think one of the main reasons is I didn't want to wake up at 35 and realize, hey, this is not where I'm supposed to be, and possibly regret and try switching, where I'm just like, hey, this world's got a lot in store for us. You're too young to not take risks. Let's just do it. So I quit before I found another job. 2 years into my career, and I'm like, yeah, let's take a sabbatical. Let's go on another trek. But that's not what happened. I was very fortunate to have been given this opportunity to try sales as a first timer at this startup. So Paperflite's been that place for me to guide me through the entire journey, for starting off as a very, very, amateur novice, but move on to, confidently handle larger deal values as well in the 1 year that we've been in sales. So yeah, that's when we sit.
So, okay, given you did sit in Cisco and you did a very product oriented role, I mean, I would say more API application kind of stuffs that you did. What made you move to sales? Was that a conscious choice that you did, or you were okay with anything, trying out anything?
So if I had to make a conscious choice, I would have moved to pre-sales because I wanted to be at the brink of both technical and a customer-facing role. That's what I was ideally going for. But how I landed the job was another story that I'd probably slip in anytime now. But it was more of the confidence that the recruiters had in me to have given me this entire responsibility to take forward the entire process. So at startups, it's not very often that you actually have a dedicated pre-sales and a sales function. So if you are pitching your product, if you're going to run the entire prospect through the journey of the product cycle, the demonstration, the solutioning aspect of it, you might as well just sell it to them, right? So that's where the team comes from. That's what has worked for a lot of SaaS startups as well. Pretty much what I landed up in with what I wanted to do, and wasn't highly different, right? And SaaS as an industry is generally supposed to be a slightly easier to solution tool as well. So software as a service that you're selling, it's not supposed to be complicated. So that's also when I realized that that is a new stream that you get to explore, and that is definitely way more exciting than what I would have probably had at pre-sales. So that's also why I started liking what I was doing, loving what I was doing.
Awesome.
Yeah, I think one more thing I want to add is the timeline in which Varshni moved. Like, I know, like, Varshni graduated in 2019, worked for 2 years, and she left Cisco in the middle of the pandemic, like early 2021, where like the job market is going crazy. Is like the hiring freezes and stuff, and like Varshni is like, it's like, okay, no, I am going to do this. It doesn't matter. So one question is, there's this constant thing like, how do you manage like expectations with your parents and like other people around you, right? Like how did you handle those conversations?
Right. I think before you answer, why we ask this question to every single person we have in this podcast. Okay, how do you manage expectations? And we kind of see that each person has their own way of managing it, and it's very interesting. So yeah.
Definitely, because I think that's a very valid question, because that was something that for once in my life I didn't ask myself before I took this decision. I was at this place after years of staying indoors, that I decided to do something that was going to make me happy at the end of the day, right? And probably not the best time at Cisco for me back then. So I'm like, hey, this is a talent that people are going to look for. So I think I had a little bit of confidence in myself that told me that I have my credentials, and I knew what I wanted to do, which unfortunately a lot of people in the market right then weren't pretty confident about, right? So with that, the trust that I put in myself was all that made me take this decision. And like I said, this is the first decision that I've taken without considering the consequences, right? So, what I prepared myself was to go back to a job with a pay cut, start off as a junior, like literally start from scratch if needed. So, that was something I told myself before I took the very, very big step of, putting in my papers. But with my parents, it was a very big struggle until they realized that this was actually what was making me very, very happy. They obviously, for people of their generation, the brand name, the kind of progress that, our predecessors have set for us. You grow from an engineer 1 to an engineer 2, and then you become a team lead, and then you probably start either managing or become a solution architect, and then you become a director, AVP, VP, and you hit the ladder right there, right? The corporate structure was something that people got attuned to, and they felt that's what the security for any job was going to be, right? So regardless of whether you stay in the same company or you switch sides, it was what people believed for to be an ideal way forward. But I think as anybody in our generation has seen, the career ladder is anything but linear or exponential. So you have your highs and troughs, you have loops. You're probably going to go back and start as well, and there'll be a lot of places where you actually intersect and repeat what you've done, if I have to put it that way. But at the end of the day, when I come back from the office, so we were working from the office throughout the pandemic because we believed in, in-presence workforce, which again, I'll be sure to talk about a lot in the future. It was very important for them to see me come back home with a huge smile on my face. And that was every single day. And I don't think that's quite possible if you really don't like what you're doing. A lot to go back to what I value as well, the kind of contributions that go in, what has been the learning day in and day out. So there have been a lot of factors that compounded into the entire space, but essentially that is what kind of made them wrap their heads around it as well at the end of the day. But answering that question very simply, I did not manage expectations. I just didn't.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome.
You just took the plunge and showed that, hey, like, I'm happy doing this. I hope you're happy with me being happy.
Yes.
Yes.
I think the natural progression of our questioning would go to the point where, given you did take the plunge, what are the kind of differences that you did see when compared to the big company versus the startup? Yeah.
That was the biggest change, because in the startup, it felt like you were going back to doing a project in college. You literally have to do everything yourself.
Don't tell me it was a college and project.
Yeah, I did projects in college, okay. No, I did projects in college, okay. Maybe not for
You are a good
academics, but
student.
there were, yeah, I was, probably.
Okay, sorry.
But
Yeah, go on.
I think I was also okay. Let's say projects. Let's probably look at organizing an event in college. I'm sure with TEDx and everything, you guys would have also seen the amount of workload and responsibility that one person has to take. So when I first walked in from serving yourself with water, I used to get water bottles in my Cisco table. For an engineer to become a full stack developer where they just own an entire feature that needs to be built, right? So when I joined, we didn't have anybody in product. So when your activities were taken into the sprint board, if it's up on the board, one engineer owns the entire task, right? And then you had a tester who would probably validate everything. The fact that you understand the requirements by yourself, you push this into production with the code base that we are, review it by yourself, and then have it passed on to testing, is actually a very large chunk if you think about it, because in larger organizations you will have someone come and explain the use case to you because you have no idea what you're contributing to. It's a much larger initiative, and it's masked and filtered down to just your task at the end of the day. So you don't know the impact that it might be having, right? And then you have your PM governing you, giving you your deadlines, telling you that, hey, this is your effort that needs to be put in, this is the velocity at which we're expecting it, these are your story points, and this is what you need to be probably, you need to be carrying forward with. That's not what I saw here. This is more from a very technical standpoint, right? And when I started off with sales, I was surprised that my annual revenue and my income and outflow of cash was out there in front of me in an Excel sheet. Like that is not something that you really expect as a level of transparency that you're given in any place as such. So that was actually a little bit of an adjustment, because you're always conscious as where you're probably overstepping, whose bucket are you probably getting out of, and all of that, which sunk in as a corporate mentality. But here it was just the entire team working together to get one thing up and rolling, right? So if we're talking about contributions, I used to have people from engineering, from product, from design, and from customer success for a large deal that we were moving, right? It used to become Paperflite's deal and not Varshni's deal. So for any salespeople listening in, I'm sure you know how much it matters to you as a salesperson, right? But that's one thing that we are very clear to take out of this. Yes, I'm getting my commissions. Yes, I am going to be getting paid for it, right? But that is not the focus at the end of the day. And I think that also speaks a lot about the customer centricity that we go after. So it was, I think, just the complete alignment of my values and the company's objectives and visions that completely aligned, that has made me who I am today over the years.
It's interesting you spoke about like transparency and company values like multiple times, and I think we need to talk about the company because I've been part of the company and I've been really happy with my short stint there. So let's start with the story of like how did you come across Paperflite, and what I know you've told me personally the initial conversation of how you went in and you wanted something else and they gave you something else itself. Let's start with that and we can talk about the company values after that.
Definitely. So when I was working with Cisco, we started playing badminton in the middle of the pandemic. So I'm from Chennai, and I knew nobody here because I moved to Coimbatore for college, and then I worked in Bangalore for a couple of years. So all my Chennai friends had disintegrated, and I really had nobody to spend time with outside of my four walls of the room. So that's when I came across one of my school seniors who was like, "Hey, come, let's play badminton." So this one coach who was like, "Yeah, I'll sneak you guys in. Just don't tell anybody else that we're playing badminton here." So that 4 people group grew to a group of 56 people. So clearly wasn't a secret anymore, where a lot of SaaS founders from Chennai started to play badminton. Right, so I had at least 5 or 6 of them, either co-founders themselves or people from the senior leadership who came to play. So I was like the kid trotting amongst, the big shots who came into play right there. So I think somebody new came into play one day in the mid of Jan 2021, and I was introducing myself as an ex-Cisconian. So I just dropped my papers, and I'm like, 10 more days I can say ex-Cisco now, like confidently. So the co-founder that I currently worked with picked that up, and he's like, "What do you mean by you used to work with Cisco?" And that conversation grew to another 20-minute lunch, understanding about what I was planning ahead, which definitely did take them by surprise. But at the end of the conversation, since the assumption was still, for me to stick on to engineering, he was more than happy to put me across to somebody that would be open to recruiting at this point in time. When I told them that, hey, no, I'm looking at pre-sales, there was like a 2-minute of silence right there where he probably just, had all the whirring going on in his brain. He was like, "We might have an opening. Would you like to consider?" So I wasn't going to go ask them, right? So before that, I've barely talked to the person. I've probably waved hi and bye. So that was the aura that we got from this amazing human being. But after that,
What's his name, if I may ask?
I'm just going to reveal it in the end. But yeah, so this is Yega Kumarapan.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah. So yeah, now you know. It's the same Yega Dixit goes on and on about. But that was the first conversation that I had. And then that transpired into an interview with Vinod, my CEO, and my direct manager who I report to. but that's not a term that I would use otherwise in Paperflite, right? So it's just a teammate. Like, I don't technically report to him; he doesn't manage me. So again, going back to the interview, it was a Saturday. I walk into the office and I'm like, please take me in. I love the office. Oh my god, yeah. So when you guys are putting this up, I'll probably like send you a couple of pictures from the office. Just like put it up on the video podcast. It is
Yes.
amazing. It is
Awesome.
beautiful. And so when I was in school, I went to a Montessori school, and they had brick walls where we had hands-on learning, right? And that's what hit me again when I went back to Paperflite's office. So the HQ here is so well designed and built, that it actually feels like home. I know this word is thrown around a lot these days, but I think this is a challenge that I would throw up to anybody to actually make them say that themselves. It actually does feel like home, right? So that interview again was not a technical interview because I've never done sales before, right? So it was a very, very accommodative, probably, culture fit interview that I had. It was a 45-minute conversation with just another mentor of sorts, right? So this happened on a Saturday and I was at office on a Monday. So there went my 3-month sabbatical plan or any other, possible idea that I might have had, but I couldn't have asked for anything better. And I think I've told at least 50 people the story, and every time I end the story, I just like look at myself and I'm like, I'm still smiling. Like it's been 14 months since I joined them, and it's not changed, like not one bit. So yeah.
Egambaram, I mean, I'm just telling you, man, if you're listening to the podcast, this is hiring 101.
But bro, you botched his name a lot.
Exactly.
Sorry. Ega. What's his name?
Let's
Sorry,
stick
once
to
again.
Ega.
Let's stick to Ega. I'm very, very
Yeah.
sorry about that. Cool.
Yeah, bro, that's how
we just cut it off.
Yeah.
We just cut it off from the podcast.
As you said, hiring 101, that's how she pulled me into Paperflite. She told me so much about Paperflite. I'm like, is there a product role? She's like, no. But then she like, send me your resume. I will send it to him. And the next day, someone from Paperflite calls and like, are you free for like a 45-minute interview? It happened on, I think on a weekday, and the next day I started. I'm like, bro. So.
Oh no, Dikshit, I think that story was Dinesh called you, and the interview was scheduled for a Saturday at 11 a.m. You didn't know the invite came through, and I'm like, Dinesh, did you see this?
Yeah, she sent it to me. I
And
didn't
then I
have
see
it.
something on Dinesh's calendar, yeah. And he's like, oh shit, okay. Let's jump on the interview, and he was there with us from Monday. So, and yes, subtle plug-in again. Dikshit was like the role model for any product person that we could hire after that. I am not even kidding. He set standards so high that we're like, oh my god, this is not like Dikshit every time we talk to somebody. So after
Maybe.
3 months after we left is when we got our product person. I think we're finally happy with our person right now. So yeah. Thank you, Dikshit, for helping us.
Yeah, dude, like my experience there has been like really amazing, and like one important thing that I can tell is people there are very clear with what they have to do. Because for me, like, see, I was a 2-month intern, and like the first day Ega comes to, like, yeah, I have a call with Ega, and he's like, these are the 3 things you have to do. Like the first 2 weeks you're doing this, next 2 weeks you're doing this, the last few weeks you're doing this. That gave me so much clarity on how I have to work and how to achieve my goals, which I found like very different from like the other place I worked. So yeah, I think that's one really important thing.
Now with
So-
Dikshit having sent the other place he works, and I'm like, can you please cut Cisco out of the podcast?
Oh, I can say it out, bro. I worked in Cyprus.
Wait, all this will come back to haunt you, bro. I'm not even kidding. Wait for it. Okay. So, one interesting thing I think you kind of mentioned is your office reminded you of your Montessori, right? Sid and I were looking at your LinkedIn page, and weirdly enough, usually what we do is we put in our UG where we studied and stuff, right? But you put in your school. That itself was like, for me, two things that I noticed. First of all is proud sister, and I have absolutely no idea what a meliorist is.
Meliorist.
Okay, and the third thing that I noticed was the fact that you're Abacus Montessori school. So why don't you tell us why this is the way it is?
Definitely. So, quick background, abacus was from my kindergarten to 10th grade. I did 11th and 12th in another school, my undergrad in Amrita. So, yes, I've gone to at least 3 different educational institutes, so to speak. But abacus has been the reason I am who I am today, because one of the simple fact that it was just not like any other school, because of the board and also because of the values that the school carried over a period of time. It is an environment that believes that a class should not have more than 25 kids, no 100 sections in one class. We had one section, one class, with 25 to 28 kids. That's it, right? And the entire Montessori method that Maria Montessori introduced is basically to learn everything that you do have hands-on. So you basically visualize, feel, and take it in, like you absorb it, instead of just reading off of a board or off of a book. So to begin with, abacus was a school that had a mixed environment concept, where anywhere from your pre-primary 1 to class 1 was a mixed crowd of 5 to 10 people from each class in one environment. Right, so we didn't even have to call it a class, it was called an environment. So starting from there to probably having group discussions when you were 3 or 4 years old, instead of sitting in a mainstream class, has changed your perspective over the period of your entire being after that, because that is not mainstream, and I didn't know it was not mainstream then, so that's what I thought was normal. And it was literally the kind of education that you are imparted in college, that you had as a standard of learning throughout the entire schooling that I did there, right? So it was a little bit of a shift when I moved from abacus to another school where I was in Fiji, which was hardcore IIT training from classes from 7 to 7, which was very rigorous, but it really made me appreciate what my fundamentals and my foundation was at the end of the day. So I'm like a huge advocate of Montessori and ICSE boards, because I think as a child, that is where you learn your basic values. It's what grounds you. And a very literal definition of that was that we used to sit on the floor when we learn. We never used to wear shoes to the class. A lot of scientific reasonings behind that, on the lines of you literally connect with the earth and you have that energy transmission when you're learning, which is very, very important, right? Which takes us back to the Gurukul days as well. So starting from that to we had a unisex uniform as well. So there was no girls uniform, boys uniform. So everybody had t-shirt and shorts, a t-shirt and pants after 8th grade, I think. So that was how gender neutral, if you have to throw those fancy terms from the woke culture of today, that was how respectful the system has been 25 years ago. So yeah.
Talk to us about you being a proud sister and the word which you does not know about.
Sure. So proud sisters, because as a member of the family of 4 that I am right now, my brother has grown leaps and bounds from what I thought he would be. And for someone to be
Did you really think you wouldn't succeed?
Yes. So it wasn't he wouldn't succeed, right? It just, when he was being brought up, so no flexing here, but I was a star student in school and in college. By that I mean, I topped the class, I was good at culturals, dance, sports, any format of being in an institution, I was there, and I was there in the front. So people recognized me by that a lot, and he started being shadowed as Varshni's brother. There was a lot, over a long time, he didn't have an identity of his own. So my mom was worried, the typical Indian parent that she was. She's like, oh my God, I have such a smart kid, and then what is this guy doing? which actually put a lot of pressure on him. But the moment we pulled him out and we went to different schools at one point in time, he started doing a lot of things that we didn't expect him to do. But it still was in a very timid, nervous phase of his growth, which my parents weren't, really very accommodative of, because I was a very mature and fast learner. But little did they realize that my learning stopped there, and that's when he was kind of starting. So, over the pandemic, the amount of transformation that he's gone through, and the effectiveness with which he's actually purposed the lockdown and staying in his room has been completely mind blowing, right? So we started off with a drop shipping company called One Drop, which actually just delivered merchandise door to door, by him being the bridge between the vendor and the customers, right? So that did really well, and he was actually recognized as a budding entrepreneur by a lot of platforms. And we were like, oh, so this guy can do business. And he just took us by storm when he completely went into the Web3 NFT blockchain space and came up with a completely new concept, which was one of the 8 applications that got accepted into the Antler Fellow. So, for anybody who doesn't know what Antler is, they are probably an equivalent to YC, Y Combinator, who actually encourage and incubate budding startups, both from the school and post undergrad stage, right there, right? So his was one of the 8 applications that got through, and he has a grant of $20,000 for the startup right now. So now you can completely relate to me as to what actually has been the growth for him as a 19-year-old. So for me, having worked in a startup, I know that's not an easy path or route to take, and not for a second or a third year student of engineering. So I am incredibly proud of him, proud of his journey, and respectful of his commitment and dedication that he has. So now I'm at the stage where, like, hey, you won, sister. And I'm like, that is what I was going
The
for.
roles have reversed.
Yes, they have, and I'm okay with it. I'm like super happy about it, and super happy for him as well. So. And meliorist. So I would, for easy explanation, is probably the opposite of nihilist. You believe in the world, you believe that this is going to become a better place. This came from a little bit of a rough patch that I had, where I'm like, okay, fine, everyone's going to die, what's the point of living? But I think the trek was a very transformative journey that I had, which prompted me to take a few decisions in life, and just generally believe in people, and there are good that is being poured into the world, and if you do, you're gonna be a contributor to push that to a better place. So yeah, a little bit about meliorism.
Nice. So why did you think that these things fit in your LinkedIn, where usually people don't put this in LinkedIn? So why?
As a sales professional, what I learned was it was very important to be yourself, right? So sales has been a profession that's been stereotyped a lot, from being compared to a car salesperson to anybody who comes across as pushy just generally gets labeled as hey, stop selling it. That is not what selling is. Yes, your end motive for a salesperson is the money that's associated at the end of the sale. So it's very natural for someone to, go into that zone. But for what sales was, and what, sales leaders today and the entire SaaS industry, and now the Web3 industry is moving towards, is entirely value-based selling, right? So money for yourself is one of the last things that you are thinking about. But there have been such refined techniques that have been brought in to make sure it doesn't look like a sale, but it looks like a process of making sure that the buyer is making the right decision. And LinkedIn is your one channel of go-to when you want to learn about anybody, right? So as a buyer, they vet the seller as well. They do want to understand what kind of person they are, where they come from, geography and your background, and basically your entire career becomes a testament of who you are when they're talking to you at this point in time, right? It just talks about your journey and how much you bring to the table as a sales consultant at that point in time. So when you do have such, personal things and your beliefs up there, I also have a quote from Maya Angelou in my bio, because that's entirely what I believe in. So it becomes a very, very easy, figure that you're building for the person that you're talking to on the other end, where they do have a decent perception of who they're going to be talking with, right? So apart from just my profession, LinkedIn's a beautiful community where I've met amazing people across the board, across verticals, across industries, and that one or two lines is actually kind of what prompts people to dive deeper into your profile on a larger perspective. So they call it the header. And if you have an optimized header, you kind of give the person who's interested in you a complete perspective of who you are, right? So that's where I have what I do, why I do what I do, and a little bit of a personal touch as such.
Nice.
Yeah, I think the next question is, like, you spoke about LinkedIn being a great community, and there are a lot of people. Like, I personally believe like LinkedIn is a great tool. Like, if you use it right, correctly, there's like a lot of opportunity. But a lot of people think it's just for posting, like, say, your achievements or your career track, and that's about it, right? So, like as you said, like, you optimized your LinkedIn profile such that people can reach out to you. And one interesting thing that both Lou and I saw was that you've added that human element to it. It's not just your career, right? So, one, like, how did you decide to do it? And two, like, you write so many posts which are very heartwarming. Like, you want to read it, right? It's not like, say that I can show one post. Yeah, this one. This is a hiring post which you've put up, where you talk about like, 1 second, sorry. Yeah, here you put the Abacus Montessori school, and then say, like, on the backdrop there's like 4 years of engineering and stuff. Then you realize you get into sales, and then you're like, okay, cool, we are hiring. So, like, what's like your thought process behind doing these posts? And I feel like you've created like an individualized identity for yourself on LinkedIn. So my question is, like, one, how much opportunity is this giving you? And two, how much time do you put into this?
Great question. So probably to answer your first, right? Honestly, it wasn't a conscious effort. At some point in time, I just realized that it's high time I have to be myself. So it wasn't, content for the sake of optimization, but it was content that I wanted to impart into the community that was giving me so much. If you want to talk about this post in particular, this stemmed from a conversation that we were having, where it does become a barrier for people to want to do something that they have to do because of, either a very prejudiced opinion on what that transition would look like, or just the fact that, hey, you have to pursue your career in what you've invested 4 years of education in. Little do we realize that it's India, and people kind of don't really have an option after college, and with the privileged tier 1, tier 2 institutes that we have gone to, it's a natural I don't know, a next step for us to take up what's coming on our laps as part of the placement process that we go through, because brand and money get associated as the topmost prioritized things before we take up a particular offer. as a part of the pre-placement talks, little do you know about what the actual role that you're going to be doing about is, right? It's very masked, and for an organization that's really, really large, I think as any one of us on this podcast have worked with, you cannot reach the right person to tell you what is it that you're going to be contributing back to. So I really wanted to bring that up and tell people that, hey, you have people on the other side who've, taken the leap of faith. You do need to appreciate the fact that there is something better on the other side if that is what you want to do. Just don't be scared to switch over because you've not either seen too many people or because you don't have the support. I think that's where we started off with as to how I handled my family and the society and everything else with the switch. So to just let people know that, I'm there, and I've also mentioned the other people who've done the same as well, right? To let them know that they're not alone in this entire journey. And honestly, I did not spend a lot of time on content. The reason you think it's heartwarming is because it is directly from there, Like there is very little editing that goes into it. The least editing that I do is to check my grammar is correct because it can't be spoken English. But that's all that goes into it. And I'm really happy that, people are acknowledging it. And I think the reason I try to keep it as human as possible is because at the end of the day, very few people are actually who they want to be on the platform that's available to a social audience. People you know, people you don't know, people you've met once or twice, people you don't want to be talking to again. They're like all kinds of people there, right? It's very important to make sure that there is that level of transparency on that platform that you are on. So, which is also why I do not have a timeline to which I post. I do not commit to, hey, I'm going to do this every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or I am going to have something of this topic at a particular point in time. I didn't want to do that because one, I think that would become pressure on me, where I've been forced to put out content which might have not been heartwarming at the end of the day, right? And two, there's so much of it out there already. And I think I just wanted to take a different route where I was being completely honest with what I was going through personally and what is it that I can offer to the community as well. In this case, the hiring. So we were really looking out for people, and the very picturesque scenes that people otherwise were painting from a HR perspective was something that I wanted to do as an employee of the company on a non-recruitive basis, right? Because that I felt was more valuable. That's the testimony that I would look for if I'm joining another company. So just thought I'll be the small face of it from both, a culture and an acceptance point of view from the organization.
Right, yeah.
That's brilliant. I mean, everything about your LinkedIn, whatever you spoke about, was truly brilliant.
Yeah.
I mean, it's mainly, I think it really hits for people like me who don't really use LinkedIn a lot. I think it's the fact of the matter is I don't quite exploit LinkedIn to the way I should probably be doing, and you have currently made me think about it. So that's awesome. I want to go back to your sales part of things. So you spoke about how sales is different. SaaS sales is different and it is value based. I didn't quite completely understand because even now when a person sells sales, in the end of the day, it's about the revenue that you generate. So what do you mean by it's value based sales? How is SaaS sales different?
Great question. So as an industry, basically software as a service has aimed to be an easier way or a more efficient way of doing something that you've otherwise been doing, right? So pretty much all of the products that we use today are just to do that. So Paperflite, as a specific example, manages your content in a very efficient way and makes sure that you're distributing it with an additional factor that lets you track the content that you have sent across. This would make absolutely no sense because this is for marketers and salespersons as the persona that we would cater to. So when this is the process that you were talking about, when you have a buyer who's like, hey, I have this problem and I need you to solve it, there's very little that you might be doing different from a competition But the fact that you're telling them that, hey, if you're sending this experience out, when your customer, when my customer's customer is going to be viewing this, the ease of use with which they'll go from one document to the other, or the buyer experience that you're giving them with the amount of customization that you're putting in, which talks about the effort and value that you fed into the process, is what hits the chord. Because I can be like, hey, I have feature A, B, C, D, E, which is better than feature X, Y, Z from our competition. You get so much more at a much cheaper price. That is what has been happening like everywhere, from cars to, real estate to any one of that. It's pretty much what's been happening. But the fact that you're actually going beyond what they would be doing, with the simple example of, how amazing you're going to feel when you sign, your, let's say, the house deal that you've been going after, with that one pen that you've gotten, and how you're going to treasure it for the rest of your life, is probably what we're going back to, with the entire transformation that we're going from, a feature selling perspective to a value-based selling. But having said that, the SaaS cycle as such, right, is relatively shorter than most of the other technology hardware that they will have to bring in, or a real estate deal that you're going to be pulling through. So when you have a very limited time that you do, for the selling with your buyer, there is a lot of efficiency that needs to be pumped in, right? And you can't just go up and ask your buyer if, hey, have you seen all of this competition? Do you know if this is the feature that you like? What is your budget? Like, that is one question that will just throw them off the boat. But this is information you need to equip them with the right solution, right? Because if the budget's not fitting, everybody's wasting their time. If it is too expensive, it's out there. If it's too cheap, they might think that, hey, maybe these guys aren't good enough, or anything along those lines. So these elements that you're trying to fish out needs to be very ingrained and weaved into the conversation, as opposed to being asked as a direct question, right? So these are like probably the methods that have been imbibed and evolved over a period of time, and is continuing to evolve, to make sure that you do impart the best value. And to give you a very quick example, I talked about budget, right? So BANT was one of the methods that you used to use, to discover the fit of your buyer and the solution that you're trying to sell. So BANT stands for budget, authority, need, and the timeline that you're looking for, which is literally just 4 questions, one after the other, right? And if any one of this is a no, you will go up and tell them that, hey, maybe this is not the right thing for you at this point in time. But this has moved or evolved into a lot of other methods of questioning, and right now we're at a phase where we would want to prioritize method and paperwork that's involved, and much more, right, with this process called MEDIC or MEDPIC, which is the latest, kind of discovery that we're doing to get to understand if this is going to be a fit for you or not. So from SaaS sales perspective, you have multiple types of sales, right? You have inbound, outbound. You have marketing trying to pump in a lot of generation, lead generation, with how exactly, we're going to target our audience and who are going to be our ideal customer profiles we're going after. So with various models that's scaled for the industry, for the growth projection of the particular organization, you do have a lot of inputs and variations that you could try out. And your methodology that you're following also heavily depends on what kind of sale that you're doing there as well. SaaS again has predominantly been inside sales, because one, virtual world right now, nobody has the time, and shorter sales cycle, right? So you don't have the necessity to be there for 6 months to pull an entire deal through. People buy in a week, people buy in a month. I think the longest sales cycle I have had has been 2.5 months for now. So it's either yes or a no. There is no, elongating it for most of the products in the industry.
One more thing I want to ask is sales basically, as outsiders think, is like just selling is like, okay, cool. Do you want this thing? As you said, does it match our product? Connect them. But like, what are the other aspects of sales that are there that maybe from outside we don't see?
I think that's a very, very good question.
Just, I would like to, I'm very sorry.
No
I'd like to just add one thing there. So, see, from what I know also, there's one very important thing about sales is how you create a narrative, right?
Yes.
So, just to add to that question is the narrative slightly different? I think you did touch upon it when you answered my question, but then it would be great if you could give a little more insight.
Absolutely. So, Sid, to probably pick up from there, right? I think so. It's a very subjective thing to be big to start off with. You have scaled startups, right? So we recently had one of the startups that started off in China that went public over a period of 10, 11 years. When you talk about sales engines there, and we compare that with probably what we have in Paperflite, you have one person adorning three roles on the other hand, as such, right? So it's very, very dependent on one, what the sales cycle's value is, what are the deal sizes that you're dealing with, and the scale at which you've actually put forward the entire engine. So it is, a process that evolves over a period of time. You see what works best for your kind of customers, your industry, and get to that place, right? But I think what's made me who I am is also understanding what has gone into building the product, right? So because you sell something, it doesn't mean you really don't know what are the difficulties that we've had while building it. Where have each and every one of those features that gone into the product stemmed from, right? What has been the need for it? When you have that perspective, both from an engineering and a product standpoint, you know exactly where you can hit the chord with the person who's buying it for you. And for me, I've been very fortunate because I sell to my own persona, right? I sell to marketers and salespeople, which again has taught me a whole new world of selling. Because again, if I was to sell a product that is to be catered to the IT or the DevOps or finance side of things, I might have not been able to learn so much in this 1 year that I've been here. But when you talk to directors, VPs of sales, CXOs, CMOs from that particular vertical, they literally walk you through the entire content strategy that they have and how a sales team is enabled, which is what our product caters to. So that has been phenomenal in terms of you just being able to use that in another bit, saying that hey, I know this is what you go through, here's how we help you solve it. So that is definitely something that I would ask for people to keep a ear out for, like all the time. Just talk to as many people as possible, even if you're not selling. That it's very important for us to
It's a
understand
great point.
what matters to them, because you will not know because you're not there yet. When your CEO or somebody is pitching, they would have been through that process. But just a KT from them is not gonna get you there as much as somebody else is going to buy your product telling you what their problems are. And I think that is where your rapport and relationship building would be very, very, very beneficial. You need to get them to a level of comfort where they're like, hey, see, I have this problem and I think I want you to solve it. That level of comfort where they come to you for a solution is where we're at. And I think as a product, as Paperflite, and for the customers that we've had, touchwood, we've been very blessed with amazing people. So they are people who will reach out to you when you have anything like that. And it has been a clientele that we're very, very proud of. So it goes both ways. It definitely swings both ways, but that is definitely the visibility. And I think just generally as a salesperson, you just have to be friends with everybody on your team, man. It just is an added advantage. If you probably want a perspective to a feature that's been built, you go to engineering. If you want a cool deck that needs to be prepared, you go to marketing or design because you want to impress that particular customer, right? You do plug in all of this, but it's very important that you know the team as who they are. So that's been amazing, and I think the freedom to do that in Paperflite's also been really cool.
I think from what you kind of said, right, I kind of am getting this impression that salespersons, they are storytellers, but also they need to be keen observers. This is like the
Yes.
kind of gist that I kind of got from it.
So
Okay.
one thing that people think is a salesperson is a person who talks too much, but I think it's the exact opposite of that. It's a salesperson. If you want to be a good salesperson, you need to be an extremely good listener. Like that is your first skill. So I think, yeah, people just need to like change their perception. Anybody who talks, no. They're not gonna be amazing at sales.
So
Just because
Sid, you and
just
I, yeah, we both.
No sales.
The only thing we keep doing here is talking. Yeah.
No, but I think I would like to not agree to that because you've picked up from very intricate points of what I've said, right? So both of you are amazing listeners. And you're on a podcast, guys. Come on, you have to talk. What are we listening to if you're not talking?
Yeah.
So Varshni, I have. It's not really a personal question per se, but I just want your thoughts on this. So, in the beginning of it, you kind of touched upon in these large corporations, we have no idea what we are contributing to, right? And we want to do some, I think in our generation especially, we want to see our impact directly, how it kind of relates in the world. And another thing that you did point out very recently is the fact that, the timelines in the technological world, in SaaS, etc., is shrinking. Do you think we are being impatient? Because our previous generations used to sit it out in large corporations and then wait for a point where they could actually make the decision making and take the calls. Your thoughts on this?
Definitely. Again, very good question. If we were to talk about the rate of evolution, right, I think historically we have enough data that says that it has always been exponential. So if you're even going to go back to 20 years, I think right now the world's evolving at 20x the speed at which we were even 5 years back. The amount of new tech that's coming in, the amount of tech that needs to support the newness of any tech needs to be at par, right? So after this point, there were a lot of studies that said there's nothing ahead of its age. So if something is coming in, then that is the time for it to come out. There is nothing that we would probably be surprised by at any point after this. We've had enough of those from the perspective of something new, right? Having said that, the pace at which we are going, right? So even large corporations have been forced to move to a faster cycle. At Paperflite, we operated a 2-week sprint cycle, which probably not is the case in any other larger software store. But I think there will be a point where they have to optimize to start rolling out because the demands of the customers are as such. It is just a cycle, right? So you either have a product-led growth or a customer-led growth or a sales-led growth. You also have a market-led growth. When you have, multiple options to choose how you want to be going forward as a company, I think it's a natural say in which, you define the pace at which you want to grow as well. And if you are supporting somebody specifically, you have to be ahead of them of their growth because you are an important part for their growth. So are we being impatient? I don't think so. Like my personal opinion would be no, because if you're not running at this pace, I have a feeling a lot of people are going to fall out. Like, it's going to be too late for them to catch up at some point in time. But having said that, are we going too fast? For a little long, I did think we are. Especially with the growth at which companies are growing, right? So you have multiple ways in which a company is led. In terms of revenue, you have, the entire VC-backed organizations. You have organizations that are completely bootstrapped, and you have debt fund and everything else. Right? So you have multiple sources of financing, and the one route that people have taken pretty commonly is the VC route, right? So you raise money, you get a product up to the thing, and then you either continue to raise, so you keep increasing your valuation, or you exit and you just take your equity out of it, you liquidate it basically. with so many options, people have become money driven, right? The organization's growths have become sales driven because you are answerable to a lot of people at some given point in time. There is a lot of, volatile elements that determine what next for you, essentially. So it's a conscious decision that people are taking, but with the amount that we're seeing, right, with people raising 500, 600 million in the startup world, where the organization is like barely 4 to 5 years old, the financial stability definitely becomes a question. So that's something that I've been interested in as that's exactly what led to the big short or the recession the previous time. There was a void that was constantly being created. We know where in the past, but now we believe it's going to be in this spectrum of things, right? So we are expecting a crash maybe in, let's say, 2023, but again, it can still be saved. So there's a lot of moving elements, if you want to consider that, which might be a little too fast in terms of the inflation that we're talking about. But in terms of a product and the growth that we're going forward with, I think we are paced correctly. Too long an answer, but yes, so that'll give you.
No, that was a really interesting answer. Yeah. One follow up to that, you spoke about VC backed companies. There are a lot of companies raising like lots of money and then like companies shutting down. So,
Oh, yes.
one question I have is the other day we were talking about, you selecting a company. Like previously, when we were back in college, we just saw like, oh, this company is offering us really good salaries. We'll just join this. You had like a really interesting perspective last time where you spoke about like the background research you need to do before you join. So my question is, say if you were to apply for a job now, like say as a sales person, so what would your process be like of vetting a company and choosing a company to work for? What are the different parameters you
That's a
consider?
really good question. Yes. I think I'll take that in like, two spectrums because one is definitely the culture that I completely believe in, right? So I'll probably read reviews, talk to people from there. And I think right now the entire system has become more of a referral basis. People rarely apply to companies like out of the blue, right? So you always do want to know somebody and hear firsthand from them. So that's more from a culture perspective, right? But from a projection perspective, from a private company, any of the ones that we might possibly be applying to, there's not much visibility that you have for the 5 year or 10 year plan that they have, because I don't think that is the route we're taking at any given point in time. So, as a salesperson, what I would probably want to know is what's the percentage of the team that's attaining their quota? What are the new ventures that we have in mind to expand to, right? Because there is something called market saturation at a given point in time, and I've seen that with a few of the other companies as well. So, we do have a constant need for something like this. What would be the next step, both in terms of product and a revenue perspective, would definitely be something I would want to hear from the management. So these are questions that I believe, as anybody who's growing would definitely want to understand before taking that decision. And again, I think it comes back to them selling the company. It depends on how convincing they are as well. But there are a few stats that I think should start becoming, a deal breaker if you think that's not what you're going out for. And personally, I've liked the freedom that I have in Paperflite. So to move into something else would really require, a good amount of, let's say, acceptance in terms of what I can bring in, and that aligns with what they have from a growth perspective for the company, just a plan that they might have. So I think it's very important that you align goals when you're starting off. It becomes a little difficult to set or establish those terms when you start off with them.
So Varshni, you like working in Paperflite a lot, right? You don't want to move to any other place, from what your answer is. But what about higher studies? Any plans of that?
I've tried almost like I think 3 times, and I don't think I've really come very far in that journey. So initially, when I was at Cisco, I'm like, hey, let's do a master's in computer science. Let's get our networking background sorted, and then continue our journey from there. After I moved to Paperflite, I think the amount of learning that I've got here in the 1 year is more than what I would have understood in a B school. Right, this is something that you are bestowed with the responsibility of, and it's literally on you to bring in money to the company. So the amount of learning that goes in to do that has been phenomenal, right? So from everything that I've spoken, I'm sure you would have understood, like, these are conversations that I've had with people, and that is what I think is the biggest learning, right? So higher studies, I know that we've had generations tell us that it's a gateway to breaking into the management side of things. It's when people will start respecting you, yada yada yada. But I think that age has passed. So I do have plans of higher studies. Yes, I'm not going to deny that. But I still think that there's so much more I could learn today with what I'm doing, and with the people that I get to talk to, who have an MBA or any of those fancy degrees. So there's always that learning that comes in because it's already filtered. So they've gone through that entire process. They've implemented, tried out various strategies, and you're actually getting the results. You are their vent of the entire experimentation that they've been through themselves. So I think there's no better learning, and I guess a very personal choice, right? But to me, it just made sense to learn more before I enrolled to a B school, because B school in, let's say, a year or a two, to me, right, it's not going to change who I am. Yes, in the industry, it does put you at a higher pedestal. So career progression wise, maybe I might consider it. But I still think, so again, quick ROI that I've done, right? Madhavan, I'm sorry. But for the 2 years and the cash that you'll be burning with education, there is something that you can progressively make with, say, a 30% or a 40% of an increment year on year, and get to that with the package that you will graduate, where you're actually learning real time while getting paid for it, rather than enrolling in a B school per se. But having said that, you have multiple advantages to, like, alumni connects, actual entrepreneurs, or anybody that you've seen the growth of coming back and guiding you through the entire process, with much more visibility into a lot of different roles that you might want to branch into. Definitely not denying any one of that. And obviously the curriculum per se, right, it grooms you for one time management. That is probably one of the biggest takeaways of a B school, rather than what is actually being delivered in the course. And how the case studies and the learnings from all of that is delivered to groom you rather than change you as such. So to me, if that's something I'm getting in my job, I don't think there's anything more blessed than that, right? But I've got a couple of options on the lines of either an online course, which would give me the same environment but would still keep me with my current job. I don't think I'm at a point where I would still want to do education full time. And again, I think personally, I've seen a lot of money, so I'd go back and live as a student is not a compromise I was yet willing to make. So again, it's very, very personal, but I felt it made sense for me at this point in time. And again, it's never too late to study, right? And that's something that I really want to strongly tell people as well. There's no more reasons as to, hey, you're a girl, you need to get married. Hey, you're already 5 years into this stream. Why do you want to do it now? Hey, what are your peers, going to think about you? Or will you be able to match, what your peers are making? We're past that. We're way past that. And there are ways to make money. So if you are worth that, I don't think there's anything that's going to stop anybody from giving you what you're worth, right? And if you believe that master's degree is going to validate that, then that's definitely, the route to take. But again, if you're willing to switch, right, if you're going from technical to the management perspective, then again, that becomes your bridge, right? So it's essentially the process that you're put through and the school that you come out of from, which are tickets for people to believe in you and your capabilities, right? It's almost not what you've actually learned in a base school. So these have been my thoughts and perspectives, both from Indian education and education abroad. So that's where I'm at with my husband.
So we've given a lot of PR for Paperflite and Abacus Montessori in this.
Yeah.
Oh, yes. So abacus, I don't think PR is really going to work for abacus because they have a very, very selective process for admissions, and they're very clear. Like even today, I don't think there are more than 30 kids in a class. And I'm talking about a 20-year journey. So for schools to still stick on to that principle is something I have massive respect for. And I think that's the kind of attention that a kid needs as well, right? When you're just one
That's
of the
true.
people in a class of 60, where you have one teacher or subject, I don't know how long that's going to go forward with how smart kids are these days. Oh my God. I think that's like a whole new topic for another day. But the amount of intelligence that 4-year-olds have is something I think I had when I was 10. So, yeah. So, if you want to meet the kids' intelligence, I think Montessori is a really good environment. So, any parents or expecting parents listening to this, go put your kids in Montessori.
Lou, we started doing PR also, bro, from this podcast.
We don't
You're
get
a
paid.
user
Yeah.
base, man. Your listener
It's okay.
base is
We
like
suck
that.
at sales, bro.
That's why you're Varshni here. Varshni, I have one question.
Yeah, sure. Lou. Oh,
Yeah.
yes, Sid, yes.
Yeah, I had one question. Like, I think you spoke about the Web3, like from SaaS to Web3, and there have been so many companies coming up, like saying we want to build Web3 applications. One example is your brother itself. So, uh, like, what is like the stage of all these companies right now? Are they looking for salespeople? Because from what I've seen is like, obviously there are developers, and now like from the past few months, people are hiring product people. But what is like the situation of sales? Are they hiring salespeople, and like what are the conversations like?
That's a great question. So I think Web3, as the entire value prop that they're bringing in is for pure distribution, right? So there's no single proprietor owner for anything. Um, so personally, again, with a few conversations that I've had and what we are probably expecting is not going to be a sales function but more of a consulting function, right? Because it again depends on the product as such. When you do go forward and pitch one such product, people are used to this buying methodology, right? But more on the lines of partnerships or consultancy from a larger perspective is what we would ideally be ending at with where or what kind of tech that Web3 is going to be introducing in the near future. But having said that, right now, companies like Polygon or anybody else are actively hiring for sales executives, right? So a good background of blockchain and the tech per se is going to give you a very good edge to just get in there. And to be very honest, there's a lot of money in that space, right? Because if you're just equating that to like a Web2 and a Web3 space, it's like almost 10 to 20x of the valuation that you're talking about. That is how much in general the inflation is headed towards. Good thing that it's not in the currency that we speak, but if you do
Yeah.
translate, that is what it translates to. Right now, yes, there are sales openings, if you would like to put it that way, but I think as we progress, things might take a different route. And it also depends on what Web 2 has in store for us, right? Because from what SaaS started off as 10, 15 years back when Salesforce introduced cloud as a solution, we've come a very, very, very long way.
Right.
So there's definitely going to be evolution. I am no one to say, to be very honest, because I'm like the smallest of smallest parts of the community that we're building. But yes, there's immense potential. And just the fact that selling is not being called selling anymore is like, music to the ears. It's what it should be, and it's what's gonna,
Yeah.
make people have better decisions on their bags at the end of the day. So yeah. That again, my 2 cents. It could go any way, but this is a little from what we've read and what we're kind of observing from the sales standpoint.
Damn, yeah, that's really interesting. Yeah.
Awesome. I can't wait for you to, give music to my ears in the metaverse. Anyways. So, I mean, that's with all the questions that I had. Sid, do you have something more?
Yeah, I had one last question.
Okay.
after
This
that.
is what I wanted to know. Ask, bro. Ask.
Yeah. Like, Varshni, like, this is like the last question I had. And, like, you would have had some learnings as an engineer and, like, some as sales, as you said, like, your 1 year, there has been, like, a transformative learning experience. So, if you had to say, like, top 3 learnings for you, like,
I
through
think
sales,
all of
what
them
would
would
it
be personal, right? Just the fact that, one, you need to know when to shut up. I think that's very important. You need to stop and listen to people. I've learned it the hard way. People have cut me off saying, hey, can I interrupt you? And then put their thoughts forward. So that's when I went back to listening being one of the most important skills a salesperson should have. So I've generally started respecting people's words a little more. I always used to, I think, but it's just grown a way more. And what it used to, right? And the second is the general fact that you get a joy out of solutioning, right? You're like, hey, I gave you a solution that actually solves the problem you're looking for. You'd learn to draw happiness out of the smallest of things. You close a 5-user license account, you're celebrating it. So you take a pause and you actually, give yourself a pat on the back and appreciate the efforts that's gone into it. So that's been, personally, it's been a very transformative experience for me. And the third thing I think I would say is to break it down and analyze, every action that you are taking, because you can. If there's something that you can learn from it, you consciously make an effort to do it. So I think all 3 of them are personal, because this was not something that I was, one, paying attention to, and 2, respecting or following before I started doing this as a profession, right? When your profession demands it, it automatically becomes your second nature as well. And that's why I also really insist on me being as human as possible across platforms, across conversations that I have. So I think this would be my 3 learnings from being in sales.
That's amazing. Yeah.
So
Yes.
I will utilize one of the learnings right away. Know when to shut up absolutely right now. Thank you so much, Varshni, for joining our podcast. It was really, really insightful. I really enjoyed it. Sid, anything you want to say? Last things?
Nope.
So,
I love
guys,
the
thanks
conversation.
so much for
Thank
having
you so
me.
much,
Yes, this is
Varshni.
my
Yeah.
first podcast, so I think it went well. Please cut this out. But
No, it
it
went
was
really
an
well. It
honor,
went really well.
to be very, very honest. And you guys did
Thank you.
well.
Thank you so
Woohoo!
much. Okay, man. This and all will cut out, okay?
Yes.
All right, guys. I'm Lou.
And I'm Sid. And we are Lucid.